Could you describe a recent situation where you felt that a leader could have benefited from additional training in culture building, leadership, or both?
Oh my God, every day of my life to literally every day of my life. Um, so yeah, it's interesting that you say that. And I mean, again, in my experience, people are promoted into managerial roles, and we call it leadership, but we reward them and we recognize them for management behaviors. So the planning, the organizing, the control. I mean, I remember when I was at university, management was described as having four aspects to it: planning, organizing, leading, and control. That's what I was taught. Like leadership was part of management
Hmm.
instead of leadership being its own thing. I mean, this is in the 90s, and yes, thinking has changed, but a lot of people are still stuck there. And I've seen situations. Just the other day, I was working with a team, um, doing a little bit of work around team cohesion and things like that. And it was very clear to me that the manager, although really well intentioned, um, they themselves were in way over their head, and they did not have sufficient understanding of team dynamics, of how to resolve conflict. They themselves didn't understand. You talk about that collective personality, so they didn't understand the collective personality of the team. The team itself isn't toxic. They're very lovely people. They're mostly people, highly empathetic. Can we all just get along? So all of the things that we want to see, but when we take that too far, it becomes people pleasing and it becomes avoiding conflict. And there's this surface level agreement, but actually everyone is fumingly angry beneath the surface, and there's resentment and there's burnout that's busy rearing its head because certain people feel like they're doing more than they should be doing, and some of their colleagues are lazy, but they don't have the mechanisms to give that feedback. They don't know how to set boundaries. They don't know how to disagree in a healthy, constructive manner. And they've got the deeply held belief that conflict is bad. They've not seen that conflict can actually be good and can help move us forward. So, literally, just 2 days ago, I saw in living color, as my kids always say, in 4K in front of me, I saw this playing out where the manager could have benefited from this type of intervention. And quite frankly, the entire team could have also benefited. And that's the mistake that we make, is we promote people because they're good at their job, the transactional stuff, and then we give them no leadership skills or tools, and we just expect them to just survive. And they're drowning, not just in the volume of work, but in all the people stuff and the relationship stuff that they've never learned.
Daniel Pink said it in Drive. He was talking about results only work environments. And
Mm-hmm.
I really love that because, the mastery, the autonomy, and the purpose being drivers of motivation, especially for creatives, rather than a factory worker, just work faster, you get more money. In that situation, well, especially if you're highly qualified, if you're unhappy, you just go find another job or you step out on your own. And that's the thing that many companies post COVID have to realize, that people now know they don't really need their employer, because if their employer can make X money with them, they can make X plus something. That is, the skilled individual can make X plus some profit margin without their employer. It's not easy to do, but clearly they didn't employ you because they were being kind. They employed you because you were at least paying for yourself, and almost certainly paying for yourself, plus making profit for them. So it's really worth them doing, even if only for greed. If all they care about is money, then they need culture change and leadership training.
I agree with you 100%, but I think unfortunately most organizations are still in that results only space. They're stuck there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think most of them don't understand, when you and I talk about value and we talk about making money, And we talk about things like, retention or knowledge management and retention. I think too many business leaders and managers don't understand that we can quantify the value of those things. They speak in spreadsheets and profit margins and, but they don't look at the people aspect. And that's partly, as the people profession, that's partly our own fault. But there's, I think, lots of factors at play here. But they're not looking at the quantifiable aspect of, they'll talk about client lifetime value, but they're not looking at employee lifetime value. They're not looking at, what am I worth to you? You're hiring me for, $150,000 a year. But that's what you're paying me. But what am I worth to you if I stay with you for 10 years? My learning, my growth, my experience, being a good leader, what am I really worth to you? And it's obviously there's formulas to do this. I'm not a mathematical person, but I know that these formulas exist, and I know to go and do these calculations. And I think when they start looking at the value of people and all of the stuff, culture, engagement, retention, when they start looking at all of these things in a way and a language that they understand, which is quantifiable, mathematical, when they start doing that, I think that's when the game is going to change. I think we've made the mistake of making all of this sound fluffy and, and telling them the ROI is going to be X, but we're not actually drilling down into the granular detail for them. And I've just had this epiphany while we're speaking. Oh my God, we've been doing it wrong. We have been selling it wrong. And we need to speak to them in their language. We're always saying about, what's in it for me when you're doing a pitch or something. We're not explaining to those leaders, those results first leaders. We're not explaining it to them in their language. We're explaining it in our language from our place of, psychological safety is as important as your health and safety policy is as important as what your balance sheet says. We're doing it wrong.